Welcome to the Zoom service for Stuart Mallinger. When Adam, Phil, and I started to plan for this service, we asked ourselves what our expectations were. We wanted to remember and honor Stu and respect his heritage. Even though we are not together physically today, we are together virtually. Some of us have decided to pre record our statements because it is still an emotional time. However, we are all present and with you here today. For the program, please mute your microphones and turn off your cameras. There will be an opportunity after the scheduled speakers and slideshow for individual audience members to speak. During the slideshow, please raise your hand or type in the chat box. Phil will serve as moderator and unmute each speaker. Our program begins today with Chaplain Jack Schwartz. Jack will say a few prayers and a few words about Stu. He will also introduce the scheduled speakers. Thank you for joining us.
Sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, tova uvracha. I sing of peace, of goodness, and of blessing. Hello, everyone. It's both sweet and also very bittersweet to gather together in peace and unity at this service, one that honors Stu Mallinger, who died this past November. Let's try to find comfort in the message of faith and with words of prayer and consolation. Baruch Dayan ha'emet memit umchayeh. We praise you, Lord and Judge of truth, who summons us to life, who ordains death, and who calls us to life once again. As we assemble here today, we remind ourselves that we are bound up with one another, that however different we are, there is commonality and kinship when we contemplate our impermanence and our imperfection, and when we recognize that grief and love go hand in hand. To be sure, the sorrow of loss is seen by many as evidence that love is stronger than death, because love doesn't just stop and vanish when those we care for exit this world. God of our understanding, author of life, giver of the original gifts, breath and being, beauty and connection, in this spirit do we commit all that is precious to us into your keeping. Baruch ha'or ba'olam, blessed is the light within the world. Baruch ha'or ba'adam, blessed is the light within each and every human being. Dear God, we ask that you grant your tender mercies to us all, source of love and peace and purpose. Be with us this day and every day. Heavenly Father, you are our steadfast companion in both our joyous and our difficult times. When we rejoice, you celebrate with us. When we are anxious and afraid, you offer us a relationship where we can find courage to face the unknown. When we weep with sadness, you are our comforter. Help us, Lord, to believe that you receive us as we are, and help us to entrust ourselves with all of our trials, our tribulations, and hopes to your faithful and abiding care. Amen. Everyone here today knows the factual story of Stu's life. I've been told that he was born in Pittsburgh, that he first saw Karen, who was to become his beloved wife of more than 40 years, at a swimming pool on the west side of Columbus. where I am speaking from today. That following their marriage in 1977, they raised two sons together, Adam and Phil, of whom they always have been extremely proud. That Stu was an avid sports fan, planted in the ranks of those who supported the Steelers, the Pirates, and the Penguins, and that he faithfully kept and preserved the ticket stubs from games that he had attended. That he was an extraordinary sales rep who excelled in the realm of home furnishings. That he and his family and friends traveled far and wide with adventures that included a Rhine River cruise and excursions to a number of national parks, to California, and to the San Juan Islands. But Stu's life was about far more than mere facts. I have it on good authority, from Karen actually, the very best authority about her dearest comrade, that Stu was a man of charm, warmth, laughter, and depth, who never failed to brighten the days of those who had the good fortune of knowing him. She attests to his exceptional honesty and genuineness, and to his determination to be an attentive husband, a nurturing father and family man, a tireless cheerleader, and a dependable friend. Whatever challenges they may have faced together, they prevailed as true partners, enjoying a multitude of pleasures on their life's journey. Clearly, Stu knew how to rest in the grace of this world, and now we can trust that he's at rest in the grace of the next. Several people are scheduled to speak today. Their memories and personal reflections will sanctify this service, ensuring the beauty of our tribute to Stu. I will briefly introduce them one by one prior to their remarks. Our first speaker is Mark Simon, Stu's oldest friend. A writer and currently a resident of Naples, Florida, Mark is a Pittsburgh native who has remained a diehard Steelers fan. He and Stu made it a point to text one another during each game and then talk about it after it ended. I've learned that Mark and his wife Linda often traveled with Stu and his family. I'll turn it over to Mark now.
Thank you, Rabbi. And hello, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Karen for asking me to say some words about my best friend, Stu. It's an honor, and I am truly grateful for it. One of the things that, first of all, one of the things that I miss is that in this time of our lives, in the so-called golden years, or maybe they're better termed the graying and hair loss years, Stu and I had the luxury of not only looking forward to good times, but also to look back on our lives, the people we knew and the times that we shared. And I'm happy today that I can share just a few of them with you. Otherwise, we'd be here until tomorrow. I'm pretty sure that I can say that I am Stu's oldest and best friend, oldest for sure. Stu and I go way back. We went to kindergarten together, two elementary schools, junior high, high school, and as Stu liked to say, reform school. I have our class photo from kindergarten at Fulton Elementary School in Pittsburgh, and it's one of the last photos where Stu wasn't wearing glasses and had a full head of hair. We grew up in Stanton Heights in a section of Stanton Heights we called the Valley. There were basically three streets and two styles of houses that were 960 square feet. On one side of the street, there were double houses, and on the other side, there were single houses. Because there was only one street in and out, it was a great place where we could play in the street all the time, ride our bikes, and just had, I think, a great childhood. At one point when we were maybe 8, 9 years old, we really fell in love with the Blue Angels, the airplanes that fly in formation. And so we used to ride our bikes in formation. And one time we were cruising down this hill like the Blue Angels, and Stu flew over the handlebars and did a faceplant in the ground. And we thought maybe he did it on purpose because he flew out like that. But when we found some of his teeth on the ground, we figured he really hadn't done it on purpose. And I also should mention, when we played there, no matter what we were doing, it could be 90 degrees, it could be 50 degrees. At some point, we'd hear his mother, Florence, start yelling from maybe 200 feet away, Stuart, come home and put on a sweater. And of course, when you're a kid, you can never live something like that down. So for years, he was called Stuart, put on a sweater. Um, we kind of went our separate ways after college. Stu first went to Houston and then Harrisburg, I believe, to work for Coca-Cola. And I basically went up to the third floor of my house and smoked pot. But over the last 20 to 25 years, we've seen each other quite a bit, at least 2 or 3 times a year. Karen, Stu, my wife Linda, and I have had some wonderful vacations together to France and Alaska. Here's a hat from an Alaska railroad that we rode on together, and I thought I'd just show that as a commemoration to Stu. They would always visit us when we came up from Florida, and we would rent these VRBO places, some of which were really nice and some of which were really strange. Like one time we rented a place that was on the second floor of a barn, and it turns out the place was haunted. And another time we rented a rustic cabin in Asheville, North Carolina, and the photos made it look great, except we didn't realize that the cabin was perched just above a migrant worker camp. But anyway, didn't matter because we were all together and we had fun and we had lots of laughs. And actually, maybe it was even better that we had these funky places. And also, as you know, Stu and Karen would visit us in Naples. Sometimes, certainly once a year, and sometimes more than once. And it was always great to have them. They were the perfect guests. You know, sometimes guests can stay a little longer, but they were just great. And sometimes they would come around Karen's birthday, which was nice. And we go to a nice restaurant, and invariably one of us would say, "Hey, you know, the fish looks pretty good." The other guy would say, "Yeah." And then we would break into a song that we learned in 3rd or 4th grade, and I have to sing this song for you. And this is a song that we would sing while our wives would be kicking us underneath the table because they were embarrassed that we were doing it in public. But this is the whale song, and it goes like this. And I'm sure that Stu's listening. Oh, wouldn't you like to be a whale and sail serenely by? An 80-foot whale from the tip of your tail to your tiny briny eye. Or wouldn't you like to wallow where nobody can come out? Wouldn't you like to swallow and blow all the brine about? Wouldn't you like to be so clean and never have to wash? I mean, wouldn't you like to spout? Oh yes, just think. A feather of spray sailing away, rising and sinking and rising and blowing the brine about. That's for you, Stu. And we would try to pick the fanciest restaurant at the most opportune time to do that. But that's the thing, that when Stu and I got together, we acted like a couple of, you know, guys in high school. And one of the things that I truly miss now is that's gone, and that's part of my life that's kind of gone. I'll show you hope you can see this photo. This is Stu and I at Adam's wedding, and you can see us, hopefully see us acting like a couple of jerks. A couple of other things I want to say about Stu. I always tell people, if you ever met Stu, you'd like him. And I think that that's a good measure of a person. I know he was crazy about the Wizard of Oz, and you may hear some more about that from one of his sons, but I always thought if Stu were in the Wizard of Oz, he'd be the Tin Man. Because there's a scene in the Wizard of Oz when the Tin Man gets his heart, and the wizard says to the Tin Man, "And remember, my sentimental friend, that a heart is not judged by how much you love, but by how much you are loved by others." So last year, Stu, Karen, Linda, and I had planned a vacation to tour around New Mexico, but we had to cancel it because of COVID. And then, of course, COVID took Stu. None of us are prepared for the death of a loved one. I mean, we can say we're prepared, but we think we're prepared, but the finality of death, you can't feel it or understand it until it's upon you. And even though the odds were against him, and even though he went on a ventilator, I thought he'd come back. I thought he'd come back to us. I really did. That the ventilator was just a treatment, and that, yeah, he'd be sick for a while, but he would come back. He would recover. And even now, months later, I keep thinking, it still can't be. It still can't be. But I know my best friend is gone. Maybe he was the one person that got me the best, the one person who never judged me. As I said, I feel truly honored that Karen and her sons have asked me to speak today. And I'm also honored that Karen and Adam and Phil consider me to be Stu's brother. And I am. I miss you, my brother, every day.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate all of those really touching remarks, and the Moby Dick song too. Like that very much. Sharon Zarkin is Stu's younger sister, his only sibling. She lives in Burke, Virginia with her husband, Sandy. Sharon's daughters and their families live close by. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. I wrote a little something that I just want to read to you now. But all these words are come from my heart. I'm sleeping, and suddenly I'm jarred awake. I then realized I was having a nightmare, except my nightmare is reality. My brother Stu is gone. To calm myself, I start thinking about my memories of him, and it helps. We all have our special memories of Stu. Some of us have memories of the early years, including growing up with him in Stanton Heights, as Mark already mentioned. Some have memories of his high school and college years together. Some have memories of large holiday and family gatherings, such as 4th of July cookouts to celebrate Grandpa's birthday, our own Yankee Doodle Dandy, or the large Thanksgiving dinners and the Passover Seders, or just family dinners, large or small, just to be together, as well as memories of the annual family picnics at Idlewild Amusement Park when we were kids. There are memories of the life he created with Karen, Adam, and Phil, and the expansion of their family with the inclusion of Erica, Reeve, Heather, Austin, and Drew. Some of his colleagues have memories of sharing lodgings and good times with him at the High Point Furniture Market. We all have our own special memories of Stu that when they are brought together, they paint a beautiful picture of the person he was. Let us all keep him in our hearts with our own special memories to honor my loving brother. At the Biden-Harris Memorial on the eve of the inauguration, Kamala Harris said, "The pandemic has taught us to cherish our special moments with loved ones," and it has. Joe Biden said, "To heal, you must remember." So we all should remember Stu so that we may heal our broken hearts. I will always love him, and I miss him every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. He was very blessed to have you as a sister. Next, we have Stu's two sons, Adam and Phil. Adam is a writer who lives in LA with his wife, Erica, and his son, Reeve. Phil is a mechanical engineer who works for Chrysler. He lives in Utica, Michigan with his wife, Heather, and their sons, Austin and Drew. Adam, you're on first.
Hello, everyone. I've been thinking a lot lately about The Undiscovered Country, which is the title of a Star Trek movie that I dragged my father to twice when I was 11. It's a reference to a line in Hamlet in which the undiscovered country refers to death. And in the Star Trek film, someone interprets that phrase to mean the future. And the connection between death and the future is something that's been at the forefront of my mind since November. My father's mother, my grandmother, died last year at the age of 97, just 4 months before Dad did. I look at that and I can't help but think he might have lived at least as long as she did, and certainly at least for another decade. In my eulogy for Nan, I noted that her husband had passed 25 years earlier. And in those 25 years, she got to experience so much in the lives of her loved ones: graduations, weddings, births. I said that we shouldn't be sad for her loss, but happy she was with us for so long. I don't have that silver lining today. All I can think about is loss. The birthday parties for my son he won't be at, the graduation pictures he won't be in, the undiscovered country, this future we will not have. I want to talk for a minute about the little moments that end up changing your life. For as long as I can remember, I've heard the story about how Dad first met Mom. He's hanging out at a friend's apartment pool, and he took notice of a girl in a blue bikini who was reading the Peter Principle. Alas, his best efforts to approach her were thwarted, and he left that day never having actually spoken to her. A few months later, he happens to be with a friend when that person was invited to a Halloween party by someone Dad didn't know. Dad was invited along in sort of a, "oh, you can come too" way. And it was truly a chance encounter, because Dad told me he didn't often hang out with that first friend. So the chain of events that led him to that party were truly extraordinary. It was at this party that he met my mother, and it would be several months before he realized she was that same girl he'd seen the previous summer at the pool. I want everyone here to sit with that for a minute. Everything that happened in Dad's life after that, meeting Mom, getting married, having children, it all hinged on the choices that put him in that particular place at that particular moment where his distant friend ran into someone Dad didn't even know. Your life is shaped by the tiniest of moments: a left turn instead of a right, a red light instead of a green one. This is also true of his death. I don't know where he contracted coronavirus exactly. Maybe at the doctor's office, or the supermarket, or when he got a haircut, or possibly when he went into a gas station to get a receipt. The point is, the moment that sealed his fate was a small one, a choice that seemed utterly insignificant at the time, and not the difference between mourning him and being with him today. You never know the choices that will change your life or that will take it from you. So you should spend your life making the best choices you can while you can. Having said that, that choice existed in a much larger situation: a complete failure on the part of the federal government's obligation to its people. 450,000 people are dead because of this failure. And until the worst president in American history was out of office, we didn't even have any kind of national mournings for victims for my father. This failure is why today we are mourning via laptops and iPads rather than confronting each other in person. Literally any other human, Republican or Democrat, sitting in the Oval Office would have gotten the pandemic under control, but that man's ego, sociopathy, and ineptitude created the conditions that put my father in harm's way. One of the hardest things to accept is the knowledge that there are people who cried over my father's death on November 2nd and cast a vote for his murderer on November 3rd. This is not something I will ever be able to forget or forgive. So if you want to honor my father, spend the rest of your life making choices that will destroy the institutions that made that tragedy last year possible. The people who put that man in power are the reason I'll never see my father again. And I really hope that makes you as angry as it does me. I spoke a little about little moments defining your life. For some, that might be when they cast a vote for Donald Trump. I'm bringing this up not to be divisive, but it's important that we hear this and remember this. Choices like that made today, and we are accountable for those choices for the rest of our lives. I love you, Dad. You should be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. I think like most of the people here today, I've struggled with, hold on. Oops. Oh, well, I just booted somebody. I've struggled with what to say about my dad that nobody here today would have known already. Trying to sum up my father's life in what would be a couple-minute eulogy isn't an easy task. I said on Facebook the day that he died that he loved spending time with his family, and the family was a blurred line between relatives and close friends. He had friends from his childhood that he'd still talk to weekly, longtime friends from around his college years or from our neighborhood that we'd go on vacation with or have over to our house for the holidays. Their families were like an extension of ours. Whether it was a 5 a.m. ride to the airport or a drive across state lines in a rental truck to pick up your motorcycle, even though he didn't approve of you having it in the first place. It didn't matter. Dad was there for you. It was clear that Dad never prejudged anyone and would strike up a conversation and tell a joke to whoever was standing close by. I'm sure what made him a good salesman was his approachable personality and his kind heart. But unlike some salespeople, that wasn't an act just to close a deal. It's who he was every day. He genuinely cared about people, whether he knew you for 5 minutes or 5 years. But still, I don't think any of that's a surprise to any of you. Besides his personality, I tried to think about his hobbies, and I started to wonder if the things that I thought Dad liked might have just been the things that we liked. And he just got into them to spend more time with us and see the excitement in our eyes, or even help us find our own niche. And I'm not talking about Pittsburgh sports and Ohio State football, because those were definitely his. Growing up, Dad took me and Adam to who knows how many comic book conventions, and he'd help us search for some obscure issue that was missing from our collection. He watched countless car races with me, and he would know all the drivers and who was on what team, who he thought would win. He let us borrow his video camera, which at the time was probably a really expensive toy to be giving to 10-year-olds. And he watched all the silly movies we made with it. I'd go with him to auto shows or cruise-ins, and he'd send me articles or magazines on car things he thought I'd find interesting. He would drive across town to pick up Adam's comic books after he moved away from home, and then he'd mail them to him so he'd have them. It didn't matter if it was race cars, computers, movies, comic books, or whatever we were into that month. He was all in. And he was always there to support us, whether it was a Good Citizen of the Month assembly in elementary school, a soccer game, a swim meet, or a baseball game. And he even drove part of my gym class to and from the bowling alley for something around a month. I realized that none of these started as his hobbies, but he never complained. And he didn't do any of this for himself, he did it for us. He never tried to force us into some mold of what he wanted us to be, and we'd never had to follow in his footsteps. He did these things to help us find our own way, what we liked, what we were good at, and what we wanted to do with our own lives. And he was going to walk with us the entire way. It's in the sense that he wasn't just our dad, he was our guide. And life just got a lot harder without him walking next to us. I love you, Dad, and I'll miss you every day. Now I'll pass this along to my mom to introduce a song.
Stu loved the music of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, BC as he called it, before children. He knew the lyrics and sometimes even the choreography for the individual artists. When we would visit California to see Adam, Erica, and Reeve, we would all travel in one car. Stu and I would sit in the back seat with Reeve between us. Reeve controls the playlist. And after listening to 2 versions of Crocodile Rock, one by the Beach Boys and the other by Elton John, we suggested The Lion Sleeps Tonight. I looked over and I saw Stu nodding to the music along with Reeve, keeping time. Stu begins to sing the lyrics and Reeve is beginning to mimic and imitate him. I remember it as a connection across generations, with music being the common theme. I asked our nephew Jacob Grace to please play a version of The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Please feel free to nod your head or keep time with the beat. Enjoy.
A wimbo wep, 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 a wimbo
In the jungle, the mighty jungle, the lion sleeps tonight. In the jungle, the quiet jungle, the lion sleeps tonight. Hush, my darling, don't fear, my darling, the lion sleeps tonight. Hush, my darling, don't fear, my darling, the lion sleeps tonight.
Thanks so much, Jake. You make a great quartet. Our next scheduled speaker is Ken Sloan, Stu's first cousin, who lives in Pittsburgh. Stu's mother and Ken's mother were sisters. Over the years, these two families spent a number of Jewish holidays together, and in more recent years, they celebrated Thanksgiving together as well. Ken?
Thank you. Stu, I miss you. At a time when the world has lost so many, you're not a statistic. You are a son, a brother, a husband, father, grandfather, and you were a brother to me. While you were in the hospital, we were texting frequently back and forth. And I reminded you at the time, I think the Steelers were 6-0. Unfortunately, that went to crap shortly after. The last thing I said to you was, have a good day and kick COVID's ass. And you replied, it's kicking mine right now, but I'll win in the end. I know you did your best. Some say we come into this world alone and we leave this world alone. But Stu, you weren't alone. You may not have had people close to you in the same room, but you had a lot of hearts thinking, and hearts and minds thinking about you. I remember our days at Ornmore Hills Country Club. Those were some of the best years of our lives. Our families were always together. Unfortunately, the board of directors decided not to put the golf course in. We had a big backyard, we had a pool, and we had each other. In all the years that I've known you, I never recall you losing your temper, getting angry to anybody. You've never raised your voice, and you should be proud of all your accomplishments, of your family and the life that you lived. Rest easy, cuz. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. You know, there's an old saying that when we're born, we come into this world crying and everyone around us is smiling. But if you live life the right way and you come to the end, you can be smiling while everyone around you is crying. And I think that Stu lived that kind of life based on everything I've heard from anyone who knew him. He just gladdened so many hearts. Well, thank you for that tribute. Our final scheduled speaker will be Betty Grace, Karen's sister and Stu's sister-in-law, and also the mother of Jake, who performed that wonderful music just a few minutes ago. Betty and her husband Jim live on a farm in Missouri. Stu and his family frequently visited with Betty and Jim at national parks and took trips to Yellowstone, the Tetons, the Rockies, and Mount Rainier. All of those trips are among their happiest memories. Welcome, Betty.
On this we all agree. It feels like Stu left us too suddenly and too soon. We thought there would be more time with him, and there isn't. So what can we say about the time we had? It was a good time. At our house, we declared this to be true. Stu always made you feel at home. If you visited in Columbus, you never doubted that Stu was happy to have you there. If Stu was a visitor, you felt at home in his company because Stu was game for anything. Stu was as eager to help move cattle or repair a roof as he was to attend a major league ball game, visit an aquarium, go to a farm auction or jazz club, or attend a niece or nephew's high school play. When the three sisters' families got together outdoors, Stu hiked, canoed, and explored caves with us. Stu was at home in our family. He arrived on the scene 45 years ago. When he married Karen, he became the son our mother always wanted. She passed away only a few years later, but believed that in Stu, Karen had a good companion and that together they would make a good life for themselves. We've lived to see she was right. We sisters-in-law were young enough that Stu sometimes teased us about our uncertain steps to adulthood, but he rooted for us, praised our successes, and celebrated the events in our lives. Stu was good to our father. Dad was on his own after our mother had passed. For years, when working near Toledo, Stu went out of his way to stop in or stay overnight with our dad. Stu helped Dad with house repairs, leading to those stories about Dad's remembering useful power tools only after Stu had labored and sweated over a job using Dad's hand tools. Stu would go out to supper with Dad. Then, as was Dad's routine, Stu would head out with him again a few hours later for dessert. After Dad moved to an assisted living facility, Stu, Karen, and the boys took him on day trips to airplane museums, car shows, the zoo, and walks in the park. In the earliest years, Stu was introduced to the pantheon of aunts and uncles, great aunts and uncles, several generations of cousins, and circles of friends of our parents and us. Stu got to know them, never forgot them, and kept them alive for us with his stories and occasional impersonations of those great uncles. Stu had a genuine interest in the new generations that arrived, and he followed the achievements, academic and athletic, of his nieces and nephew, and no less so, the accomplishments of the children and grandchildren of our cousins. It's said that you don't just marry a person, you marry their family. When Stu married Karen, he became a son-in-law and brother-in-law. Time made him more a son and brother. There's no mystery as to why Stu had friends for a lifetime. He was curious about people and genuinely interested in them. He listened to them, and his company always conveyed his open heart and good nature and his unflagging sense of humor. We grieve Stu's passing, but his memories will always bring us joy. As our cousin wrote shortly after Stu died, when we think of Stu, we'll think of laughter.
Okay, so next I am going to start a slideshow. This will be about 10 minutes long. You guys, this is your opportunity to raise your hand if you wish to speak and say anything about my dad. The way to do this is down in the bottom, there is a button called reactions. And under there, there is a button to then raise your hand. If you have your hand up at the end of the slideshow, then I will introduce one by one. And when I call your name, you can unmute yourself, turn on your camera at that time, and you'll have the floor. So as I said, it's about 10 minutes, and hopefully everything's working right. I see 2 hands raised, so we can start with Dr. Brenda Toller. You have the floor. You can unmute yourself and start your camera if you wish.
Okay. I got to know Stu through my dear friend and colleague, his wife, Karen, at Worthington City Schools. And I always loved going over to their home when they had a new home project they were going to do. And Stu would give me the tour and Karen would moderate the tour. And I just enjoyed their friendship down through the years. And there's a passage I'd like to share that kind of expresses how I viewed Stu. In life, we realize there are certain people in our lives who just make the world a better place. They give us hope and raise our spirits simply by being the kind of people they are. Some people stand up and champion a cause or provide the spark or defy the odds or do the right thing simply because it's right. They don't really worry about the fame or acclaim. They just think about being good friends, good neighbors, and good people. We don't often say it enough, but we should let them know how thankful and grateful we are to have people like Stu in our midst. Thanks for being you, Stu. And that kind of captures the essence of how I viewed Stu, Karen, and their sons. Thank you for letting me share in your program today.
Thank you, Brenda. Next, Anna Grace.
Yes. So when I think of Uncle Stu and I think, excuse me, of us hiking, he would always find people who were wearing Ohio State things or Steelers things, and he'd be talking all the way up and down the trail. Excuse me. And it just showed that he was the type of person who looked for excuses to connect with people, which is what I want to do going forward, just thinking about those ways, because he did make the world feel like a smaller place.
Thanks, Anna, and that's definitely true. There was a couple instances that always come to mind, either on outdoors trails or also at the zoo. He would occasionally tell off-color jokes to the zookeepers that were standing by. It was always amusing. All right, next, Laura, you have your hand up. So it says Laura's iPad, so whoever signed in on Laura's iPad. There we go.
Share the call. I'd send him a text.
Unmute.
Okay, we don't see anything yet, Phil.
Yep, we can.
Wait, here we go.
Okay.
We can
Okay,
hear you.
Hello,
Okay.
everyone. I just wanted to comment on the service and the eulogies that the boys presented. We remember Phil, and have been friends with Stu and Karen all the years that we shared in Columbus, going back to the 70s in Lincoln Park West. Stu always enjoyed telling a joke, as we all, I think, can attest to. And whether it was a good joke or a bad joke, Stu always laughed at his jokes. And his laugh made us all laugh, whether they were good or bad. And I'll always remember his laugh and his personality. We miss him dearly, as the rest of you do. A life taken too soon. And I just wanted to wear my Pittsburgh Pirates hat in memory of Stu.
I would just like to say, I want to thank Karen and Phil, Adam, everyone who spoke. The service was just beautiful. I know this is the best we can do, but it really worked out well. Thank you so much. Appreciate all your hard work, everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dale and Laura. Levon, I see your hand is up next.
I just wanted to say I first met Karen and Stu when they were trying to close Centennial, the school board, and they made such an heroic effort, and we were able to keep Centennial open. And when I learned from Phil's post about his dad's death, and I was so shocked and so taken aback. Then in reading comments that former students left with Phil and Adam, seeing every one of those students had a time when they had interacted with him after a game, and he always managed to make them feel so special, whatever they'd done in the game or any of those things. He was always, as Phil mentioned, genuine. And he always had a smile. And I feel richer for having known him. And I so appreciate this opportunity to speak to how he always made us feel brighter. Thank you.
Thanks, and that's definitely true as well. He, I don't know if anybody really knows this, but he continued to run the scoreboard at the high school for around 2 years after I graduated, just because he felt kind of a devotion to the team, to the coach, the kids, to keep it going. I don't see any other hands raised, so if somebody just couldn't find the button or would like to speak, I guess now's your chance before I turn it back over to Jack for final words.
Phil, I'd like to speak. It's Pat.
Yes. All right, Pat, the floor is yours.
Hello to everyone. Thank you, Karen, Adam, Phil, and Sharon for giving us all the opportunity to share our sorrow, as well as some wonderful memories of your husband, your father, brother, grandfather, loving family member, and a very, very dear friend, Stu Mallinger. COVID took Stu from us, but it can't take all the wonderful memories of being fortunate enough to have Stu in our lives. Karen, Stu, your loving husband and soulmate. God certainly hit it out of the park. I'm sure Stu would say Forbes Field when he brought you two together. A perfect match. Stu is completely devoted to you, Karen. When you were together, the happiness, caring, and partnership was so evident and inspirational to all of us, especially me. I had many examples I could cite. Let me just share one. The phone calls after a long day at High Point Market. I'd think, how can he talk for so long? What can he talk about? Usually, these calls would last well over an hour. We shared a house together in High Point, and I'd usually be there, and I was always amazed. You know, he would talk to Karen, he'd talk to both boys, and, you know, I always felt bad afterwards when I'd call my wife and say, yeah, I had a good day, what'd you have for dinner? Say hi to the kids, you know, and I'd be gone. And Stu would just be so interested and so involved. Adam, Phil, since you were born, over the years, your dad and I talked about your childhood as you grew up, your primary and secondary schools, college, the support he gave to each of you on your first jobs, each of your strong marriages to Erica and Heather. What an example he and your mother were. And lastly, about his cherished grandsons, Austin, Drew, and Reeve. He shared with me the joy you boys and your families brought to him, and your mom, Adam and Phil. He was so proud of you both. There's no meter to measure joy, proudness, or above all, love. Just the sound in your dad's voice and the look in his eyes when he spoke of you both. That was love speaking. I conclude by saying I love Stu. In so many ways, he brought happiness and joy into my life. Yes, I'll miss the St. Patrick's Day card that never failed to arrive for me, either the day before or right on St. Patrick's Day. It was like clockwork. Yes, all meant all he meant to me. COVID took all of that away from us, but it can never take away Stu in our hearts. He'll live in my heart forever. Thanks for letting me share a little of the Stu Mallinger that I knew and loved. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
We love you, Karen.
Thank you, Pat and Suzanne. We still talk about epic Cedar Point trips that we would take together. So lots of good times had together for sure.
For sure.
So this is last call. I don't see any other hands up. If anybody else wants to speak, this is your chance. Otherwise, I will turn it back over to Jack for a final prayer, and then there will be a outro song played. You can leave at any time at that point. That's just to kind of let people phase it out. So
I saw Ed Levine's hand up.
But I don't know if you can hear me.
yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
If you can stand one more, a little bit of rambling. I'm from the group that Mark talked about in the Valley. I grew up there with Mark and Stu and others, and moved there to live with an aunt and uncle when I was 8 years old. So that was third grade. That's where we started. I watched those photos that you put up. Number one, thank you all who did what you did today. I started recently a what I call a grateful journal, and I put a little thing in each night. And tonight, I'm going to say I'm grateful for old friends that help us to remember and appreciate old times, which you've done for me today. In that valley, just to share a couple things, Stu and I were both fast runners. I think that the two of us were the fastest among the group, and there was always a little challenge there. But the fastest I ever saw him run, if you can picture where two streets come together, but somehow it was the cross there was a little bit bigger than usual. And we'd play baseball or softball or rubber ball down there. And it happened that the house that was on the corner in left field corner was a family that wasn't happy with us, running on that part of their grass and whatnot. And one day I was at the plate and I hit the longest ball I've ever hit in my life. And it went through the second story window of that house. And I can tell you, Stu and everybody else in the group disappeared faster than I ever saw. And I was left standing there holding the bat. That was it. But I remember Stu's speed. I remember his smile. This came through in all those photos. The photo that I saw was one of Mark and Stu and I, which Mark and Linda were kind enough to invite us to join Stu and Karen. And honestly, I don't know how many years ago it was, but a handful. And I hadn't seen Stu in 40 to 50 years, I think, when we got together then. And the thing that amazed me was, and this must have been part of why he was the success that he was, is all the details that he remembered from way back when that sparked things, good things. Anyway, it's the smile and the personality that I'll always remember. And thank you all for putting this together.
Thanks. Yes, definitely appreciated. So yeah, unless, I'll repeat it again, unless anybody else wants to say anything. I don't see any other hands raised. So Jack, I guess I'll hand it over to you for a final prayer, and then we'll do, there'll just be the song after that where you guys can leave at any time you'd like after that. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. There's just a little more service here as part of our tribute. I wanted to mention that the Buddha's last instruction to those around him as he was preparing to depart from this world was, make of yourselves a light. And I could see light and joy emanating from each and every one of those slides in the slideshow. It was a wonderful commemoration of his time here with us. There's an old saying that humor is a prelude to faith and laughter the beginning of prayer. And I bring that up because of all that people have said about his jokes, good, bad, or indifferent, and how much pleasure it brought him to share his smile and his humor with others. And so I want to thank everyone who spoke today, scheduled and unscheduled speakers, for sharing faith and prayers and memories and reflections so warmly and generously. Your words and your insights are very, very much appreciated. If you like, please join me as I read aloud the words of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. And I always add, thank you, God, for making sure that goodness and mercy follow us. But please, God, make sure that they catch up with us once in a while, for we certainly could use their help from day to day to day. We live in a world where one day those whom we cherish must leave us. And so we must strive always to love right, to love hard, and to remember well. And I know that Stu's relatives and friends will have no trouble remembering him well. I extend my condolences to all who were close to him, too numerous to mention by name. Bless you all for your unwavering affection and unfaltering support. Merciful God, may the blessings of peace and goodness be ours, even during challenging times. When cherished ties are broken and the chain of love is shattered, only trust and the power of faith can lighten the heaviness of the heart. At times, the separation seems more than we can bear, but if we dwell too long on our loss, we embitter our hearts and harm ourselves and those around us. Grief can be a great teacher when it sends us back to serve and bless the living. We learn how to counsel and comfort those who, like ourselves, are bowed with sorrow. We learn when to stay silent in their presence and when to speak words that will assure them of our love and concern. So even when they're gone, the departed are with us, moving us to live as in their higher moments they themselves wish to live. We remember them now. They live in us. They are an everlasting blessing. Together may we all see that those we have loved, though now beyond our view, have given form and quality to our lives. They've led us deeper into the wide universe we continue to inhabit, and their presence is more real to us than their absence. At long last, we understand that the bounties God has granted us are everlasting, continuing to lift us up and enrich our lives without interruption. Holy One, we humbly ask that you fill us with the intuition that what is good and decent will never, ever perish. And we thank you for implanting within each of us the seeds of eternal life. And thank you, Stu. It's said that each of us is an eagle with only one wing, and that we can fly only by embracing one another. That's where the second wing comes from. Stu, let God embrace you now, and may we all do our utmost to embrace the very best that each of us has to offer. I will now lead the traditional Jewish mourners Kaddish. Please feel free to quietly speak the names of those loved ones whom you miss with every fiber of your being and whom you wish to honor today, along with Stu. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabah ba'alma divrach hirutei, v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kori v'imru, amen. Yehei shmei rabah mivarach leolam olamei omaya, yitbarak v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha barichu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamota damiron ba'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlomo rabba min shemaya, v'chayim oleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom bimramav, hu yaseh shalom oleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. El malei rachamim. God, full of compassion, dwelling in the heights and the depths, grant perfect rest under the wings of your presence to Stuart Mallinger, our loved one who has entered eternity. He has found refuge in your divine shadow, for you, the everlasting God, are his inheritance. Stu, we will remember you for as long as the moon will rise, for as long as the rivers flow, for as long as the sun will shine, and as long as the grass will grow. This concludes our service. May God bless and keep you, and may you and life treat each other well. Yasher Koach, grow in health, strength, wisdom, and love.